Hi there everyone, Rob here from the Better SMB Podcast team. In our journey to help New Zealand SMBs improve their performance and business, today we talk to Sean Doherty. Sean has a long career in R&D and most recently at the forefront of innovation with Callaghan Innovation. In this episode, Sean gives us a chance to reflect on his time at Callaghan, what SMBs can do to push performance and how to innovate. He breaks these down into achievable steps and asks the pointy questions for SMB owners, like how can you find 1 hour a day to think about your business as a better business? Now, Sean has a lot of nuggets to share, and we had a great time interviewing him. So that's enough for me. Let's get on the show and listen to Sean's insights and thoughts.
Welcome back to the Better SMB, where we're on a mission to lift New Zealand's productivity by helping small and medium business leaders take practical steps to improve their business performance, starting today. I'm David Altiner.
And I'm Rob Bull.
We've created this platform to spark a movement. Our BHAG is to get 100,000 businesses, that includes 15,000 manufacturers, on a journey of continuous improvement. Through the podcast, our monthly column, The Last Word, a New Zealand manufacturer, and our growing community, we're building a trusted voice for SMB leaders, offering the inspiration, insight, and implementation support they need to build high-performing, future-ready businesses. Today, we're tackling a big one, innovation. Rob and I recently wrote in our NZ Manufacturer column, The Last Word, that government reforms have stalled innovation just when we need it most. But here's the truth. As our guest has powerfully argued, New Zealand isn't just stuck by circumstance. We're poor because in many ways we're choosing to be. And waiting for the government to fix the problem isn't the answer. Innovation is a leadership choice. Businesses have more power to act now than they think they might. To help us explore this, we're joined by someone who's been right at the coalface of New Zealand's innovation system. Sean Doherty has a diverse background across engineering, product development, and manufacturing. He's helped manufacturers implement Industry 4 technologies, led national initiatives to lift productivity, and spent the last several years inside Callaghan Innovation, the government's own innovation agency, navigating the tricky section of R&D, technology, and commercial growth. Sean brings a unique perspective because he's seen both sides, the transformative potential of advanced technologies and the realities of policy, funding, and organizational culture that can either accelerate or stall progress. Today, we're going to unpack what's really been happening inside the innovation system, why our future prosperity is a matter of choice, and most importantly, what business leaders can do right now to seize opportunities and create the high-value future New Zealand deserves. Sean, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, David. Hi, Rob. Great to be here.
Now, I was reading your article that you had in New Zealand Manufacturer. I think it was one of your most recent ones. You picked up on Sir Paul Callaghan's quote, and I'm curious on why you restated that and why you think New Zealand is poor because it chooses to be. What's behind that?
Yeah, it's always a great question, David. And I will say, when you join Callaghan Innovation, it's one of the first things they play you is the Sir Paul video from 2011. And that New Zealand's poor because it chooses to be really resonated with me. And it's the choices that we choose as governments, the choices we choose as manufacturers, and the choices we choose as small businesses that really drive us forward or backwards. And no more so than government, right? Because they've got the biggest stick to wield, either in the form of, I suppose, helping industry out or putting regulation in and making them do things that they may or may not want to do. I watched the video on my exit interview, and I kind of felt not a lot had changed in the time that the 6 years that I was at Callaghan. So I still come back to his statement, we're choose because we're poor to be. And I don't think the country really recognises the headwinds of change that we'll face in the next decade. So I kind of feel there's a little bit of sleepiness at the wheel, shall I say, and lack of a vision that stops us driving the country forward.
Now, to be clear, Callaghan Innovation, that's largely been wound down now, and you exited there, was it towards the end of June or maybe July?
So end of June. And I will stop. As it was dissolved, there are parts of Callaghan that still exist in other places. So the grants and funding went off to MB, and that might end up somewhere else. The scientists we had working in primary industry and mainly in the biotech space, they went off to join the new Biotech Pro, so the public research organisation. So there are parts of Callaghan that still exist. I suppose the part that I was working, which was the skills, was dissolved because that was just a consequence of working within that business unit.
Got it. So the New Zealand is poor because it chooses to be. How have you seen that choice show up in the area you focused in, which was manufacturing?
Yeah, I have to also separate the productivity conversation from the innovation thing. So Callaghan was tasked with a productivity program really to try and lift productivity in New Zealand. We believed part of the problem was when we compare ourselves to other OECD countries, we can see gaps, large gaps in our understanding of small businesses. We could also see gaps within government policy. So as much as you can say we want to be more prosperous as a country, so we can afford things like police, education, infrastructure, all those good things that we want, we're not driving there fast enough. And as our productivity comes down, we can afford less and less. So then the government has the option of, well, do we put up taxes? Do we create interventions? What do we do? And the government's quite aware that there's some major disruption on the horizon. So it's kind of like small, incremental, slow change. We're not really doing the really big stuff. Yeah, and I suppose that just comes down to investment in the space. Government only has so much money that it takes out of tax, appropriates it as it sees fit. And I suppose my question, especially to your listeners, is are they happy with it where they appropriate money? Because we always thought as Callaghan, when we spent $1, we were taking $1 away from health, police, infrastructure. So it had to have a return on investment back to the government in the long-term play. So we were very cautious about how we spent money. Therefore, we picked things we knew had a high chance of success.
So I'll just jump in there because, and this is a topic or a question David and I have talked about certainly over the last 12 months of doing this podcast, taking the manufacturing sector, because that's a space that I work in with all the lean thinking stuff. Why should organisations and businesses and SMBs be waiting for government support and handout? And because the ROI of lifting and working in that space is already there, why should we be waiting for government?
So I absolutely agree with you, Robert. And it's as clear cut as if you're waiting government to come along and save you, you've probably got more chance in the health system of being saved than in manufacturing, right? So they just have a different set of priorities, and that's what it comes down to for government is I have X million dollars or billions of dollars to spend. I have all this demand from core services, the health, police, defence. Looking at long-term future stuff, and I'm 100% on the same page as you, whereas we don't seem to be investing in our future enough, is really hard to do. And it takes a vision, I suppose, from government to sell that back to the taxpayer, that we should be investing in things that will drive the future of New Zealand.
Okay. I'm going to get real specific. What things?
So what things should the government invest in?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I just take a step back, maybe?
Yep.
So if I look at things that I see as disruption coming across the horizon, right? So basically, we're a giant farm which feeds New Zealand. And we've always done that. We've been relatively successful. Farming's going great this year, but in other years it may not. What we're well aware of is this future disruption of food with artificial proteins coming in. And we're seeing stuff being grown in bioreactors and fermented foods and things like that. That's a huge risk to dairy and red meat. If you look at the globalization and free trade, and we're just probably because the last podcast I listened to was Mr. Pink talking about the construction industry. New Zealand spends 50% more building a house. Manufacturers in New Zealand build all those components. You compare it to our friends across the ditch, those components are about 30 to 50% more than they are in Australia. How soon until those guys eat our lunch and manufacturing gets smaller? So if we don't invest in efficiency within those businesses, we're just going to be that ever decreasing farm and wondering why we're making the same mistakes and why the economy is not growing as fast as what we want. Counter argument is you start to look at some of these overseas jurisdictions like Norway or Luxembourg or the places that are really productive. What do they do different? They invest in technology, they invest in people. They're attracting corporates through having preferential corporate tax rates, and that drives their economy. So yeah, 100% agree it's important. Problem is it's not as important as health, police, defence.
Absolutely. I just think that there's certainly a case of both government supporting, and that might be raising the profile or lifting up some level of capability to deliver, but individual businesses need that self-accountability to step up to the line as well, not just always cap in hand.
Yeah, and there is help out there if you start looking for it, right? I suppose I'd be remiss not to mention like the RBP programs that they run around capability building. There is still a bunch of funding in the R&D space. It will just take us time to get back to where we were and then go forward. I'm not so sure that the innovation system was wildly broken, but they're certainly throwing all the eggs into the air to see what lands.
I certainly get that impression. So what do you think's holding businesses back? Do you think it's policy? Is it really the government? Is it business culture or the leadership within businesses or something else?
So I come back to our latest survey, David, and we've seen the trend over the last 5 years we've been measuring it. So there's always three things that come up top. Funding, we probably get that because we're a government organisation asking. The second one is lack of a clear strategy. So, they don't have a strategy for how they're going to grow their business or what they're going to do in 5 years' time, how they're going to handle disruption. In fact, if you ask a lot of them what their unique value proposition is, a lot of them can't tell you, which scares the shit out of me when I go and talk to people. And the third thing is they're happy with the way that they're doing things. So I've got the boat, the batch, the BMW. I'm pretty happy in life. If I can make it to retirement, life's great. And we've had those same results. They've been the top three for the last 5 years.
That's leadership.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's leadership capability.
Well, yeah, you could argue the funding. The others definitely lead within that leadership. And that comes down to that vision, what is your unique value proposition? How are you staying ahead of your competitors? How are you playing on a global market? How are you growing your business? They're all great questions when you get asked them. Not a lot of people come back with, this is the 5-year vision for my business. I don't know about you, Rob. You work in that space, right? We personally don't see a lot of it.
That's why I'm in business. To be honest, this is why I should have a larger team, but I think it goes back to capability, and it's something I've talked about a lot again, because I still think that there's about 75% of SMBs who don't even know that these capabilities exist or that they should have that. And that goes back to your research, David, around business leaders who can't write a plan.
Yeah, you're dead right. And when we talked to Minister Pink, he wasn't really getting information from the business community about what they needed from him. We're really in this place where people are comfortable being comfortable, which makes us more like the boiling frog, if I'm mixing my analogies, perhaps.
Yeah, I suppose to be fair, Minister Pink is relatively new to the portfolio. But it's not like MB and government don't understand where manufacturers want to go. I mean, since I've been around, there's 3 or 4 times that we've gone out to manufacturing to say, what would move the needle? What do you require? Where should we place our investments? And they're very consistent and clear about where they think we should place our investments. The ITP, I suppose, was the biggest government engagement where they went out and had a bunch of industry leaders drive the ITP. And then government came back to see what they could afford and how they could make it real. If you look at the boards of those ITPs, they were mainly business people driving the agenda. Minister Bailey and now Minister Pink also have a productivity working group from manufacturing where they call manufacturers together in a room facilitated by Advanced Manufacturing Aotearoa to actually also do that manufacturing, tell us what the headwinds are, how might government, how can we change regulation to make life easier for you? What do you want? They certainly are good at consulting. Probably heard the analogy, a lot of hooey, not enough doey.
It's exactly what I was thinking. Exactly the same statement, right?
So foreign direct investment, I don't know how much you had to do with that with Callaghan, but it's something that New Zealand struggles with. We struggle to get FDI in. Do you think it's because our businesses suck, just generally, right? That we're competing in an international market for capital. Would you put your money into a New Zealand business, or would you go put that into Asia somewhere, or India, or the US, or whatever? What do you think?
So here's an interesting analogy for you that was firsthand for me. So coming up to take a sabbatical, I said, went to a wealth manager and said, what do I do with all the little money that I have? How do I invest that wisely? His advice to me was buy a property. I'm very heavily weighted into shares. I have my own house. that's part of the problem, right? So the capital that we have mainly goes into unproductive assets in New Zealand, into housing.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to direct investment into New Zealand, I'd say, is that part of your business strategy, right? Because a lot of SaaS companies go offshore to get funding. Or we seem to demonize people like Rocket Labs when they go offshore and get funding and come back and still base most of their operations in New Zealand, but they were selling out because they went to the American. Well, we too could invest in that with our KiwiSaver funds or with the trillions of dollars we put into property.
I couldn't agree more with you there. The business that I work in, we're currently doing a capital raise, and if we were to go offshore, we get higher multiples, and we get a very different answer from prospective investors. So in New Zealand, it's how much discount can I get, or words to that effect, versus we're in a global business, right? We can sell into anywhere in the world. Investors who are far more bullish, their question is, what does it take for you to win? Which is a very different attitude as opposed to trying to get that discount, which of course most people are going to try and do on that house that they're going to throw their money into.
And that's a great thing. If you talk about productive capital, I think New Zealand's got quite a bit of capital. I look at some of these innovation ecosystem capital startups that bring money to New Zealand to invest in the innovation system. I'm not so sure that if people are willing to let go of the reins a little bit, that there's not the capital out there for them. Does government stop it? Do we have too much regulation? I'm not sure that I've ever heard people at scale saying, well, other than the Silverfern Farms and the Synlait dairies who are mostly Chinese owned, I don't hear the day-to-day manufacturer go, well, I can't get investment in my business. The caveat to that is I don't see many of them taking a good business plan to the bank and saying, this is what I'm going to use that investment for.
That's certainly within the banking space, businesses being able to talk about their business at a level that a bank is comfortable with that data to actually lend. I'd say they're very few and far between, which I also wonder how many businesses are funded on the house, because the bank understands lending on houses. If you can't tell the story of your business, your bank is still going to make their targets, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, when we used to deal with banks at Callaghan, they're interested in the 3 C's, right? Collateral, character, cash flow. If you haven't got enough collateral in your business, your house is the first thing they want you to put up. Whereas I think maybe they need to be a little bit more forward-looking and going, well, if you've got a full order book and you've got this capacity constraint and we can see the cash flow coming, why wouldn't they lend?
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of businesses struggle to have the data to be able to show that. It's one thing creating a spreadsheet and popping your forecast out for the next 3 years and going, look, if I can dump $1 million into this machine or plant or whatever, here comes the revenue. But it's another thing being able to look back 5 years and go, here's the history of our performance and how we've been growing. And now with this machine, we're pouring fuel on the fire.
Mm.
And I think we're more in the earlier version where we're forecasting out on a spreadsheet with not a lot of historical data to even talk about what's been going on. So capital is something that I believe is unlocked by your ability to demonstrate innovation. In your mind, I'm curious from your perspective on what the real difference is, because when we talk about innovation, we also talk about invention, research and development. What's the real difference in your mind between R&D, innovation, and adoption?
Yeah, so I'll say from a Callaghan perspective, it was ministerial direction. When we stood up a new grant, the minister said, this is what it is, this is who it's for, and then we create some rules around that. My first couple of months at Callaghan, I was working on the science side, and someone said they should call you Callaghan Invention, and I took a little bit of offence to that for the first 5 minutes, and then realised that the idea behind the grant was really about people standing up new-to-world IP. So that specific grant was really about invention. Are you building yourself a moat? Can you build some IP that New Zealand can keep and then leverage off to actually make more money? And that's what the minister meant by the grant when the grant was evolved. And then it goes through to that other end of the grant, which is like the R&D tax incentive, which is more about the technical uncertainties. And you don't necessarily need to be new to the world, but you have to be able to state, what are the technical uncertainties I'm trying to solve in my business and how might I get there? And once you can tick those 2 boxes, you can unlock the funding. I wouldn't say attack the funding for the funding's sake. You need to know what the business problem is. If you go, this is the business problem, this is how I think I can solve it, it'd be great if the government could help de-risk that problem by giving me an R&D grant. You'll find you can actually unlock the money relatively easy as long as you have a plan. And to probably circle back to your question, David, you've got the invention, which is creating the intellectual property. You've got the innovation, which is new to the company and actually doing something different to get themselves out of the hole. Where I was sitting was more of the productivity end, which was a lot of the technology was known, and the systems and processes were just being improved. You just needed help getting an engineer to come and help you because you didn't actually have the bandwidth to do it yourself. You could also say that there's a lot of different steps going from invention to commercialization to off the shelf. So that was that commercialization of science part, which is an easy journey. It's a very long journey.
I find it interesting that we wrap up, we call it innovation, but it's actually invention. So invention, something absolutely new, innovation, doing something with something that exists in maybe a new or different way, right? So if you look at some of the biggest innovators, Apple, they don't invent anything. They just cobble together a bunch of stuff and do it in a unique way. Sorry.
Yeah, but if you come back and look at the amount of patents that Apple launch, that's why they get so much government funding towards doing it, because they are creating paintable activity, which gives them a moat to sit in the US and create money for the US market. New Zealand's no different, right? So the people who actually can build themselves a moat through innovation and R&D are the people who will be the most successful companies. And if you look at the R&D tax incentive, some of our biggest companies are some of the biggest drawers of the R&D tax incentive because they realise they need to build themselves a bigger moat to stay ahead of their competitors.
Got it. So using invention/innovation to create your own moat, it helps build you a competitive advantage.
100%.
Ultimately, yeah. Yeah, because in general terms, I mean, if you look at Apple, they don't release a lot of new stuff, right? They might be behind the scenes developing those types of things, but there's not a lot new coming out of Apple typically. Netflix didn't invent online streaming, used it to kill Blockbuster, right? So they're just using it in a different way to create a competitive advantage. Do you see people leveraging that ability to innovate more? Like, were you seeing rising demand for the services that Callaghan offered through the manufacturing sector and so forth, or was that sort of just steady but not growing?
I would say it goes in waves, to be fair. So certainly the scientific ability that we had, so Callaghan, part of its value proposition is it had around 100, 200 scientists that we could pull on a daily basis. That was slowly incrementally growing. So as people realised they could hire those skills by the hour, that was slowly incrementally growing. And then especially in the biotech, they've got some unique capability you just won't find anywhere else. That was always pumping, and that's probably why it survived into the bioeconomy. If you talked about some of the programs that we run, some of the programs, I've got to say, were extremely good, but the subscription rate to the programs was tailing off. So we kept asking ourselves, so high NPS score, high OKR, so really enjoy the training, made a difference. We would do it again, we'd recommend it to others. You know, we will take the learnings back into our business, but low attendance rate. So we're kind of like, have we exhausted the product available market for people to come into these work streams, or they're just too busy being busy? So we're always sort of chasing our tail going, how would we reinvent the product to actually get a new audience?
Where did you land on that? I think there's a lot of busy being busy out there.
Yeah, so my fear for New Zealand, if I'm completely honest, is we have a whole bunch of almost fully depreciated assets that have been far too old for far too long. We have a culture of probably incremental innovation. You know, no one really wants to go, imagine if I got that order that would keep my factory busy for the next 3 years. How am I going to have a diversified order book if I just did that for one customer? So they'll almost shy away from the risk. But yes, there's a whole bunch of being busy, but then there's a whole bunch of small SMEs fighting for every dollar, every sale that they can in the very small market. Probably one of my other concerns about New Zealand was it's very much the job market. You know, they're making bespoke windows for house B, and then house C comes along and they're all bespoke for house C, and then house D comes along and they're all bespoke. So you kind of go, well, if you go to other countries, the windows come in standard sizes, and that's how they get the efficiency of scales, right? So it's repeatable work. You can start to automate it because it's repeatable work. But we go, no, that's the way it comes back to that reluctance to change, right? This is the way we've always done things. Don't tell us that we need to change.
So how do you think we get people out of their comfort zone?
I ask a lot of manufacturers just a couple of questions, right? So if you could choose one thing to work in your business, tell me a little bit about your business. Would you say you were capacity constrained? That means that if you could make more, you could sell more. Are you cost constrained? So you're at the end of your innovation cycle and you're just looking to sweat the asset as hard as you can, and you just really, really want to go, I just want to make every last dollar out of this order. Or are you at the stage of reinvention? So like I have so many competitors eating my lunch that I need to reinvent the product, and I just need to get out of the cycle that I'm in because it's a bad cycle. And I kind of go, if you could just pick one, which one would you choose to put your time and effort into? And I'm always amazed at which one New Zealand comes back to. Do you want to have a guess?
Capacity.
No,
What?
it always comes out to cost out.
So let's try and reduce our costs by 10% rather than growing our revenue by 10% or 20 or 30 or doubling it or whatever.
Or lifting our capacity by 20 or 30%, which in most manufacturing businesses, the scope is there. At least.
But if you ask them the hard question, Rob, if it's going, which one do you want to focus on? The majority of people I've observed talking to go, cost would probably be the biggest thing we'd like to focus on first, which sort of indicates that they don't think they can sell more, or they just want to get their balance sheet under control. And then you can ask a whole bunch of questions around the cost, right? So is it time to reinvent the products if you're having people chasing your heels anyway? What are your top 5 costs? You can have the more in-depth conversation. I was actually waiting for people to say we're capacity constrained because we've got lots of things we can help you with that. But a lot of people, they go, costs, power of electricity is killing us. You know, we were profitable 3 years ago, but the price of power is killing us. Okay, so what have you done about the price of electricity? Nothing. Do you measure the price of electricity? No, but it's killing us. And we go, okay, you can't improve what you can't measure. At least you've got your power bills and things, and you can relate them to your process activities. Oh, that might be a good idea, but no one's got time because we don't have continuous improvement people. So they're in the cycle of just fighting, right? Yeah. And we get it. We know that that's the cycle that they're in.
Yeah, a lot of business leaders and owners who get us in, their words, and I'm reflecting on one specific client, their words exactly are is, we know what we needed to do, we just didn't know where to start.
Yeah.
And that's quite often the case. And I a lot of that was accountability to start, or even the fear, or lots of other things. But stuff that we do is relatively common sense, just how it all fits in and how it fits into their 60, 70-hour week. That's the tough question, right? But once you break that cycle, and it only takes a couple of months of, yes, hard work, they're in positive territory.
Yeah. And I've got to say, since David likes Steve Jobs and Apple, he's got a great saying, right? If you can define the problem correctly, you almost have a solution. But you ask people, can you define the problem that you've got? You know, break it down, not the symptom, but the problem. And if they've got the headroom to actually define the problems, as you say, the solutions start to flow, right?
Yep. So is this going back to the start of our conversation, is that we're just not very good. You talked about the UVP. David's talked about telling that business story. That business owners haven't really sat down to find what that looks like. What are the barriers that is getting in the way? Because if they actually took 3 days off and turned the cell phone off, they probably could do that. Maybe a bit of facilitation with some experts, but we're just poor at telling our story.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, there's some significant headwinds coming, which a lot of people don't realise, right? So the other one that scared me in that article was we had a look at the future workforce, and it was said by the Workforce Development Council that we're going to be 23,000 manufacturers, people working to keep manufacturing going, right? So you go, so what is your 5-year plan to attract workforce? Or it's going to be a very highly competitive market to get skilled workers. You know, 23,000 people in manufacturing is going to be a lot of people we're going to have to find. One could say, if you talk to other leaders, that, you know, bringing people into New Zealand is pretty hard because our cost of living and our price of housing makes us unattractive to some of the global players that we'd like to attract.
So when you worked with manufacturers, you would have had the range of, you know, the people who just didn't get it and the ones who did. So in your mind, what separated the ones who actually changed from those that just kind of talked about it or thought about it? Well, probably didn't think about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know that I could say there's just one single magic moment. Sometimes it was just people that had come from other industries who went, you guys you don't even drive your ERP properly. And, you know, your idea of data as a whiteboard where you've got magnetic tiles shifting across the scheduling. Well, no one can see that, but the scheduler, at least put it into it. As much as I hate Excel, put it into Excel and then open it up so the visibility is across the organization. Break down the silos about what's holding us back. I come back down to, if you start to define some of those problem statements in manufacturing, people will go, the power one's an easy one. Power prices are going up. you kind of go, how well do you understand your power bill? Do you want to save money? There's this other government department over here called ECA. They will even help pay for consultants to come in and tell you how to save money. Would you be interested in engaging with them? Yes, no, go visit them. Things like we're trying to scale the business, and in the next 5 years, we think we'll need a digital system to get there, but they all look really hard and uninspiring. And you go, well, how hard have you looked? Because there's lots of manufacturers that have these kind of systems, and that's where clustering came in for us. If you can cluster people together, they share those learnings, and then suddenly that fear barrier that a manufacturer down the road can do it well has just evaporated overnight, right? I've just been to David's factory. David's got a system and process in place that does all the scheduling. He presses a button, it re-alters the schedule in real time to tell him how to optimize it. Rock my socks. And you're like, well, those things have been around since the 80s. Just because you've just found one doesn't make it new to world, but it will rock your socks.
I really wonder what's behind that, right? You're talking about things that have been there since the 80s. Microsoft Excel, that's been there since the 80s probably as well. What do you think's behind the reluctance to adopt proven technology? I mean, this isn't even crazy new. This is stuff that works. We're talking about people who are effectively driving to work in a horse and cart.
Yeah. Whereas I met an engineering manager just before I left, and he said, coming from the UK to New Zealand, he said, our lights were powered by electricity. You've got guys still lighting gas candles in the factory over here. And he was trying to take them through that whole change process. I don't know. Maybe we're just that reluctance thing that keeps coming back in the survey. I'm making enough money to afford the boat and the BMW. And why that continues, I will keep, my head above water as best I can. We would often say there's people less than 10 FTE just on that treadmill of trying to find the next order and trying to get the thing out of the door. They're very hard to help. Getting the headroom of those guys to come to an event to understand the future of manufacturing or what might disrupt them, or getting a unique value proposition, or getting a business statement together that they could take to the bank and invest for capacity. That's pretty hard in that really small space. But then I think there's a duty of care once you're 10 FTE and above that you need to start to think about that. So you can go away on holiday and so the business can run without you. And then long term, if you're looking to sell the business, how do we put ourselves in a good position so it looks like the systems and process support me leaving the business and selling it to someone else?
Do you think manufacturers actually get to that point where they can sell their business or become a director shareholder and take an income, or do you think they shut them down?
I would say I don't have enough data, David, but a lot of them do exit. Yeah, you meet the two dichotomies, right? There's the guys that want to do it until they retire and the people that are building to sell in 10 years. The people who are building to sell in 10 years probably have a plan. But the guys that go, well, I'm just going to buy myself a job and stay here for retirement, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, they don't generally have a plan.
And I say if we throw the old 80-20 rule into that, 80% are the ones who have built their own job. In the number of years I've been working in this space, there's probably been 2 or 3 companies that I can probably name, but yeah, certainly in one hand, that I've met that had an exit strategy in mind when they were taking on the business.
Yeah, I'd say a lot of people when they hit that 50 barrier and then they think about the exit plan. Yeah, you're right. And that just comes down to the size of SMEs in New Zealand, right? Most SMEs are under 50 people. We're a long, thin country full of small businesses.
And it is, those smaller organisations are really, really, really hard. They make up a real strong bulk of our business and our consulting business. And I remember through COVID, there was a lot of webinars going on. So, you jump on them and you listen to lean practitioners, certainly up in the States and Europe, and they have a field day when they get, a week-long improvement Kaizen event going on with a team of 50 that's been allocated just for that job, whereas I get 3 people for maybe 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
It's harder to break that cycle than working with the larger organizations.
Yeah, I had a bit of a hypothesis before I left Callaghan. And one of it was the super successful countries have a large thing of corporates, right? So there is no doubt if you look at the really productive companies, they have like the Microsofts and the AWSs, the Toyotas, they have a myriad of large corporates. And I've got to say, I came from a large corporate before coming to Callaghan. They bought some of the best training that I've ever seen, that I've never seen in New Zealand. I've still never seen it in New Zealand, even in all my time in government. Is that part of the magic bullet, right? is they had those training cycles internally to build capability in people because they realized people are really an asset. And because they were sizable, they could afford to have people to build people to be part of the asset. Whereas the small SMEs in New Zealand, they outsource those continuous improvement people or the lean practitioners. And then maybe it's a bit coming back to the Steve Jobs quote, maybe they need to really define the problem that they have. And that would just go, well, we need people like Rob to come in and actually understand that we need to get this. We haven't got the standard work built into the business. We need to work with someone to get us there. But then, no, they're too busy. The orders are important this week because we haven't got enough orders to keep the factory running. Oh, no, we've got enough orders to keep the factory running, but we're struggling with shipping because of quality. And it's that hamster wheel of going round and around and around. And I'm very sympathetic to it too because I've seen it firsthand and I like.
I might use a few sound bites for advertorial purposes after this.
What, the hamster wheel?
Got the cartoon. Absolutely. But it's true. And it is really hard when you're in that moment. It is really hard to sort of pull yourself out of the weeds and just take a breath. And a lot of owners do feel guilty in removing themselves for half a day, knowing that their team is struggling back on the workshop floor.
Yeah, but without someone without the vision, and this, I think you've alluded to this before, without the vision of how to drive the business forward, they'll always be in the hamster wheel and never get out of it, right?
So in my mind, vision's critical. You've got to know where you're going and you've got to have a plan on how you're going to get there, right? But then innovation plays a really important part. And ultimately what you're saying is innovation's a leadership choice, as is having the vision, right? What do you think the first question leaders should be asking themselves is?
So I come back to that, what's my unique value proposition? What makes me different to my competitors? And if it's, I have leaner, meaner processes so I can get stuff out the door cheaply and efficiently and beat my competitors to market, that's a great value proposition, right? If you're relying on the value proposition, I'm the only guy in town, you're probably going to find it really hard when the new guy in town turns up or a lean, mean competitor from Australia turns up. I encourage all business leaders just to take a little bit of time out of their business just to go, what is the vision? Can I sell the people on the vision? And then can I execute the vision? Do I understand what the tactics are to execute?
We've also talked a little bit about business leaders being stuck in, I guess, lower value work, right? Stuck in the business, not working on the business. Where do you think those leaders can start if they want to shift into that higher value workspace?
Yeah. So I suppose there are two. The value mapping is a great part, and Rob would certainly explain that better than I would. But actually understanding where the value of the work is from the time you get the order to the time you ship to the customer. Are you valuable at all on the shop floor? Or are you more valuable in sales? Are you more valuable in actually working on the systems and processes to streamline the business? Define where your value sits. And if you don't have it, maybe engage a consultant. And my advice there is always don't look at consultants just in your particular niche and industry. Also look outside of that because everyone uses the same consultants for food and beverage. One of the most powerful ones that I ever saw was they employed a guy from oil and gas, which had a really risk-adverse appetite. And he was like, so what do you do over here when things go wrong and you can't ship product? Oh, we haven't worried about that. What do you really do in traceability? How do you capture things electronically so you actually know the sensors are good and the data's good and then your QA problems go away? And he just brought that different lens that typically a food and beverage person wouldn't necessarily bring. So I think depth of experience, sometimes from an outside guiding light, is well worth the money invested into it.
We always enjoy working with sectors and most of them are sectors that we don't have any experience in, because then we can be the really annoying 5-year-old and go, why? And that's not the 5 whys, but it's just bringing in that naive point of view, going, really? Why do you do it? And please don't say this is just the way we've always done it, because I might just do some damage.
Oh, yeah. Or they have processes they have that are 30 years old, and you kind of go, why don't you use electric? Use a Google form. Get people to fill out a Google form. You don't need a person on the phone to actually write everything into an Excel spreadsheet and then transfer it into another Excel spreadsheet somewhere else. Use technology. Figure out where technology works in your business. You don't have to do everything with technology, but figure out where dull, boring jobs are that we need to fill for 23,000 manufacturing workers in the future. let the dull ones being done by robotic process automation or by robots or whatever's right for you.
So I'm sure that Excel spreadsheet with the person on the phone holding it up to their head like this happens probably thousands of times a day. What are your thoughts on how leaders can actually create a culture where they listen to their staff who are saying there's got to be a better way for us to do this? Or actually even just ask their staff that question, are you guys seeing a better way for us to do X, Y, Z, and then shut up and listen to what the answer is?
How about I tell you a story? So this goes way back to when I was in manufacturing. So I worked in a plant and it had a suggestion box. And you'll love this story. So it had a suggestion box. What we never told the operators is if it cost us less than $1,000 to do a change, we would do the suggestion, no questions asked. If it costs between, I think, $1,000 and maybe $100,000, we put the operator at the center of the change. So if we decided not to do it because it was too expensive, the operator was well aware of why engineering decided that it couldn't do the change because it would be cost prohibitive. But they felt like they were put in charge of leading that process, right? So we pulled them off the line. We unpacked the problem, and it was things like, actually I stand over here on the line, and the push buttons are too far away. And we go, okay, well, we can change that. We had an electrician come in one day who goes, so I get call outs. I come to site. By the time I get to site, the overload's cooled down, and we press the reset button, and the line goes again. But the operator could have pressed the button 2 hours ago, and he could have had 2 hours more uptime. So we investigated a solution, and it was maybe a couple $1,000 a motor. So we put it on the big, really expensive assets. We actually gave the operator a countdown and told them how long until they had to press a remote reset, and then they got the remote reset. We blitzed our OEE calculations by just that one little change. The operator just said, it was an electrician just going, you're paying me to come in to do something that an operator could do in half the time. You're causing all this downtime. Let's get rid of it. That suggestion box at the end of the year must have saved them, I don't know, a couple $100,000 easily. Things that nag at people every day that are easy fixes.
Fix what bugs you.
Yeah. And then you can have the real conversations, right, about if we could go faster, how might we do that?
And sometimes it's going slower. I had a client that were challenging the foreman to slow down the machine because it used to work too fast, and they used to have to stop to catch up. And so what they actually did was, when the foreman was away, because he said, no, it won't work. So when he was away one day, they slowed it right down so they could get continuous flow, and their throughput went up by 40%.
Oh, yeah.
Purely because they weren't stopping. And is that sometimes that counterintuitive mindset? But
the other one for me, Rob, is where they build inventory, right? You walk into factories, there's huge amounts of inventory for emergency stock and all sorts of things. You go, that's just, you might as well have dollar bills stacked floor to ceiling over there. And they go, what do you mean? And you go, that's just work in progress, and you need to get rid of that stuff. And they go, well, we've always done it that way. And you're like, why?
Because we get a special once a month.
We had a problem in 1996.
I think if someone says we've always done it that way, then, I don't know, flashing lights, gongs, whatever should go off, and whatever that thing is, you just kill it.
I suggest companies put a swear jar in, and it's a gold coin every time. This is the way we've always done it. It's like a swear jar.
That was one of the key statements in the Nortec Smart Factory, right? So Andrew Turner, when we did this CEO interview, he was like, the one statement I hate, we always do it this way. It's the biggest thing that will kill your business the fastest.
So, Sean, if you had one message for business leaders, business owners who are choosing between same old or step up, what would it be?
Well, that's an easy answer, David. I suppose the step up, what have you got to lose, right? If you can find that hour a day to actually get your headspace clear and actually go, what would the business look like in 10 years' time, and how might we get there? I think it comes down to those little incremental things you can do on a weekly basis to get you ahead. And that could be, from Rob's perspective, sorting out your systems and processes. From my perspective, what new technologies could we take to do some of the dumb stuff we do in the business? Repetitive form filling and things like that. How can we automate that kind of stuff? My question would be, how could you find that hour a day to actually think about those things?
So I gave you the underhand pitch for you to hit for the home run there. Now, Rob's got a handful of questions for you as we move into a bit of a quick fire segment. So we'll We'll see how you go with this one, just to round us out.
I think I'm up for the challenge.
Excellent. Okay, we'll see how these go, and they are quick fire, so short-ish. Oh no, you're an ex-government employee, so short answers will be great. So, question 1. What's one trend in manufacturing or innovation you think will define the next 5 years?
What government invest in. And that's whether we do the same old things that we've always done, or we'll actually take on board some of the recommendations from Sir Peter Gluckman to do something slightly different.
Yep. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for New Zealand Inc. to step up globally?
That is the toughest question. So I think the high value manufacturing sector is totally underinvested in New Zealand. With a bit more focus, and this comes from business and government and from, partners like NZT and co, there's some amazing businesses that are locked in New Zealand. How do we get them global faster?
If SMB leaders choose to act now, what could New Zealand's economy look like in a decade?
It could revolutionise itself. If you look at other countries like Ireland or Singapore, they were able to do it in a 10-year time frame. To significantly move the needle. It just takes a country and vision to do so.
Yep. And David and I, we've got certainly a vision around 100,000 businesses, and it can be done. What do we say, David? Just 9.5 years?
That's it. We've used up 6 months already.
Okay. What's one future technology you think will be mainstream sooner than most expect?
I honestly think the large language model thing will revolutionise manufacturing. So a lot of data sits in a lot of different databases currently in a lot of manufacturing sites. There's a new protocol, MCP, that plugs into, dare I say, AI. I'm using lots of acronyms here. Anyway, there's a new tool that will hopefully unify a lot of those databases, and then you'll be able to query it native language, and you'll be able to say, where is the biggest bottleneck in my factory? How will I make this month's shipments more efficient? How could I drive costs in my electricity? And it should be able to come back based on real world data from your manufacturing plant on how to do so.
Finish this sentence. The future of New Zealand business will belong to those who choose to
innovate.
That was too quick. All right, last question. If you were able to hand over one of your best books for any manufacturer or any business SMB leader, what's your favourite go-to book around a lot of this stuff?
There's quite a number. I think Rewired, Reinventing the Product by Eric Schaffner. Do you know, read his book?
Yep.
Yeah, there's lots of them out there, but his one is really, and we saw it with Clever First Aid. I don't know whether you know them, but they're a company in Christchurch that revolutionised first aid kits.
Okay.
So that was about, instead of selling a product, sell a product that produces data and then sell a service with it. So their value proposition is, when you go to a first aid cabinet, you open it up, you want everything to be in the first aid cabinet. And then there's the compliance of who opened the first aid cabinet, what did they use, and what was the incident. So Clever First Aid came up with the idea of doing an IoT connected first aid cabinet. It automatically reorders. When you open up the thing, it starts an incident report. The more things you take out of the first aid cabinet, the more email alerts the manager's getting saying there's something bad happening.
They've just taken the big bandages. Run.
Run. But they've done some really good deals with large corporate food and beverage companies because of it, right? Because it eases that burden on compliance. It makes sure the first aid cabinet's fully stocked. And they just ship whatever you use to you so they know that it's always fully stocked. And you kind of go, it's such a simple idea to add a lot of value to something that's an existing product.
I think I might have to put it on audio book for my next road trip just to refresh on that one.
So yeah, there's a local example. But Reinventing the Product's got lots of things like that. It came from Rolls-Royce selling engines by the hour. The lift companies sell lifts by the day. There's lots of unique value propositions if you go digging.
It's similar. I was listening to Blue Ocean Strategy the other day, right? And it's similar theory to that is, out of all the things that people are doing in that one sector that everyone, it might be sort of a crowded market, but what's that one blue ocean? What's that one unique UVP really? And they picked the story of Cirque du Soleil, of an industry that was tanking. They actually exploded it because they found their unique value proposition and just did it extremely well and totally inversed the circus sector.
So I come back to the Steve Jobs quote again, right? So if you can define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. So make sure your products and services that your solution fits a problem, not necessarily looking for a problem, but one that lots of people can understand.
This has been eye-opening. What strikes me most is that we've moved beyond the usual innovation conversation. It's not really about technology or funding, it's about leadership courage. You've shown us that the capability exists, the tools are there, even government support remains, but we keep choosing the comfort of cost cutting over the harder work of building capacity. We keep choosing this is how we've always done it over what if we tried something different. And maybe that's the real message for business leaders listening. Innovation isn't a destination, it's a daily choice. It's choosing to spend that hour thinking about your business instead of just working in it. It's choosing to listen when your team says there's got to be a better way. It's choosing to ask, what's our unique value proposition, even when the answer might be uncomfortable. The suggestion box story says it all. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the smallest acts of leadership courage. For our listeners, the future belongs to those who choose to lead it, and that choice starts tomorrow morning. Thanks for listening to the Better SMB. If this conversation challenged your thinking, share it with another leader who's ready to make different choices. We'll see you next time.